Yo, and welcome to our Stabbomancer Spellshot build. Now, I'm sorry that I've been away for the past couple days. Life has been pretty crazy, so I'm sorry about the delays. I'm trying my best to keep up with the channel as I can, so please bear with me over the next little bit. But nonetheless, today we're going to be looking at the Stabbomancer Spellshot melee build, and that melee has a big asterisk around it because a lot of this is technically going to be spell damage, but nonetheless, all your damage is going to come from actually swinging your melee weapon. So, hey, I'm still going to count it as a melee build. Like pretty much all of our builds so far here in Wonderlands, there's going to be a lot of double dipping with this build. So you guys are going to be outputting insane damage. Hopefully you guys were able to see how much damage you could put out with those opening clips. Now, the awesome part about this build is while melee is going to be our main source of damage, there's also a lot of gun damage to be had as well. So if there's any enemies that you cannot melee, or if you guys get some really bad modifiers, unfortunately that's how this game is designed, you're not going to be able to punch every single thing you see. So it will be nice to have that gun and also spell damage as well, depending on what spell you're using, to be able to kill your enemies. But yeah, before we jump into the video, if you guys want the save file for this build, you want to try it out yourself, make sure you guys join up on our Discord. It'll be in our save file section in there. But let's go ahead and take a look at our skill trees first. Now, our main tree is going to be the Stabbomancers. We're going to be going all the way down to the bottom with a secondary into the Spellshot, and that's going to combine with our class mod that we're going to get to a little bit later in the video. But our action skill that we're going to be running is from the shadows. This is great for all the melee stuff. You can get up close to enemies without them really hurting you too bad. And obviously it's guaranteed crits, and that's going to help us deal a lot more damage. And then otherwise, taking a look at our skills arsenal, we're going to get melee, spell, and gun damage. This is literally going to help everything for us. So with our melee weapon, it's going to be benefiting from melee and spell damage at the same time, which right there, free double dipping out of this one skill. Also, the gun damage is nice as well for the weapon that we're going to be holding. Also, if you need to shoot your weapons as well. Then we're going to grab 2 into haste for the movement speed and also melee attack speed. Melee attack speed is a DPS increase, so it's nice to have that. Also, movement speed is survivability. And then follow up, there's going to be a lot of increased damage, and you guys are going to be able to stack this very easily. If you're running at a target, go ahead and shoot him a few times with the weapon that we're going to be holding, and your next melee attack is going to deal a lot more damage. And then exploit their weakness. This is free increased damage against the target. You guys are going to be stacking this up a lot with one of our further skills that we're going to get to here in a second. Nimble Fingers is going to increase our spell damage, which is great. Every time we hit something, we're going to get that increased spell damage, which is just in turn going to increase our further melee hits. And then our critical hit damage, we're going to increase that with sneak attack because we are losing some of it with from the shadows, but since it's guaranteed, this is going to help cancel out that loss. And then 1,000 cuts, you guys are going to stack this to 25 basically instantly, especially when you're in from the shadows, couple hits, and you guys will be at max 25 stacks. And then Alchemical Agent, this is what's going to be combining with Exploit Their Weakness to help you guys deal a lot of damage during sustained fights. Every time you hit somebody with a melee critical hit, which once we're in from the shadows, every single one will be, it's going to apply a random status effect, and this is going to be huge for stacking up Exploit Their Weakness. And then finally, we are going to be grabbing the Capstone because this does actually, in my testing, gain the benefits from the actual Spellblade, which is going to be our melee weapon, and it helps to deal a lot of damage. Now, moving on over to the actual Spellshot skill tree, one of our main things with this whole side is going to actually just be our class feat, which is spell weaving. So every stack we get, we're going to get 10% increased spell damage. That's going to scale up depending on your Spellshot power, so you can actually get that easily being like 16% per stack, which is very strong. And once we have all of our bonuses between our class mod and our skills, we're going to be able to get 11 stacks. So it's going to be a lot of extra spell damage. And then that in turn is going to go into magic bullets here, and that's going to increase our gun damage as well. And we're going to be dealing a lot of gun damage as well with the weapon that we are holding. Also, if you guys just need to shoot with any of the weapons, this is going to be a good go-to. And then we're going to grab Spell Snipers for our spell critical hit chance, Font of Manas for our spell cooldown rate, and action skill cooldown rate. We're going to need both of those. And then we're going to be grabbing Glass Cannon. One of our shields that we're going to be using a lot gains a lot of bonus when you guys do not have shields. So this is great. And we're going to get increased spell damage out of it. And that's also why we're not grabbing Mage Armor. We don't want our shield coming back. And then finally, high thread count. This is what's going to increase our spell weaving so high. And then, as you can see, with 2 out of 1, we do have 1 point in our class mod, which we're going to be getting to here in a second. Now, taking a look at our hero stats, you guys are going to want to be focusing Spellshot power. Unfortunately, with the class mod combinations with like high thread count, we can't get Spellshot Stabbo. So unfortunately, Stabbo power is going to have to take a back seat. But nonetheless, we guys are going to get a lot of increased damage out of the Spellshot power. And then in our actual points, go strength and also intelligence for the spell cooldown. And then whatever's left, put it into attunement down here for your action skill cooldown. These two can kind of be swapped depending on what type of melee weapon you're actually using. Which, speaking of, our melee weapon is going to be the Spellblade. This is what's going to give us increased damage whenever we increase our melee damage or our spell damage, because our melee attacks deal spell damage instead of the melee, but it still gets the melee bonuses. It's very weird. This thing is really dumb. Also, your melee attacks increase spell crit chance by 80% for 6 seconds, so that's very good as well. And then the actual hilt mod on it, I would prefer Ancient, which is going to increase our action skill cooldown rate whenever we hit an enemy. Either Archmage as well, if you guys are using the Buffmeister. Normally, I don't run the Buffmeister in most like mobbing scenarios. I really only use it for bossing stuff. And then another great option would be Echo, because we're going to be dealing a lot of non-melee damage as well. So that can increase our melee output. Personally, I enjoy Ancient because I really like the increased damage and also the survivability that cycling in and out of from the shadows gives me. And then the weapon that you guys see me holding out throughout the entirety of this video is going to be the live wire. Moxie had actually made a video on this talking about how when you hit something with it, it's actually going to chain the lightning between enemies, so it's really good ad clear, and just on top of it, just increased damage overall is really, really good. So shout out to him for realizing that interaction. It is super helpful for this melee setup. So this is what you're going to be having in your hands pretty much the entire time. And then really quick, I just want to go through the enchantment setup that I normally run. So on my weapon, I run action skill start, increase damage dealt by 20%. This is going to increase all of our damage, which is really good. On the melee, I run while action skill is active, increase lightning damage by 50%, because we're just going to full send the lightning with the live wire, the Spellblade, and also if you guys are using a Buffmeister, you're going to run a shock one as well and just fully max out that spell or the electricity damage. But then our enchantment on our spell is spellcast, increase damage by 15% by 10 seconds. And then on our shield, while action skill is active, increase elemental damage by 35%. Luckily, these action skill actives are going to persist after From the Shadows ends. Pretty much as long as you guys don't go down, these are going to continue going for about a minute. So they will essentially always be active, and it's a ton of increased damage. Then our other weapons really don't matter too much. Liquid cooling is just a very strong option. So if I do need to shoot something, this is a great thing to pull out if I just can't melee them. Otherwise, I use a weapon that I can reload quickly for spell weaving. So I just have like a Ruby Spite. I just click and hit reload. Otherwise, Masterwork Handbow is a great option if you don't want to hit reload. And then finally, I do just have a Hydra Tediore on because of our amulet. So my amulet that I have has the joint training. So my critical hits will increase companion crit chance, which is going to be the Hydras out of this thing. And then the companion crit hits increase my crit damage by 30% for 6 seconds. So if I go ahead and throw these before like a boss fight, I'm going to get a ton of increased crit damage, which we're always going to be critting when we're in From the Shadows. But then the passives on here, you're going to want to be focusing into lightning damage and also spell shot power. Taking a look at the shield, there's really only 2 that I use. So for bossing, I run the Cursed Wit because it's just 100% increased damage, and when you guys are meleeing, you're going to get that full bonus. But for just general like chaos chambers running through mobbing sections, I get way better survivability out of the body rune. Also, this is going to give us bonus fire damage on top of everything, which is going to be great for our red health bars. So you guys are going to be able to cover those as well. Also, you're going to get increased survivability with restoring your maximum health for every kill. Now, our armor is very important. What you guys are going to be looking for is a warped paradigm with the high thread count, so you guys can get 2 out of 1 here. Preferably, you are going to be looking for this roll with 4 into the reload if you guys are running the Tediores. The other skill is not going to help you because it's the Spore Warden skill. So this is your ideal setup in terms of skills. Obviously, passives, damage dealt, melee, spell, all of that stuff can be interchanged here, whatever you guys can find. Don't worry too much about those out of the gate. And then the most important part about the paradigm is the melee and ability damage are increased by 50% of our increased spell damage. So all of those spell damage increases we're getting out of the Spellshot class feat or the Stabbomancer skill tree, all of these things are going to increase our melee damage, which this is going to take advantage of. So that's why we're able to do so much more damage when we stack up the spell weaving. This specific wording is an absolute must because it can be any combination of it. It could be melee and spell damage are increased by 50% of your increased ability damage. So it can be any combination of that. You must get the melee and ability damage are increased by your spell damage. Now with the rings, you guys can run melee or spell rings. It's kind of up to you. The spell rings that I had a little bit increased damage output. It was like a couple percent but I had a little bit better melee rings, so I'm running those right now. And like I said, for bossing, I really do like a Buffmeister with the bonk and zap words down here at the bottom. So these are actually going to give you increased damage. So for zap, this is going to increase your spell damage, and bonk is going to increase your melee damage. So we can actually double dip with both of these increases for our Spellblade, and you guys are going to notice a huge damage increase with this. If you guys want to run this the whole time, you can. I would just put on the Archmage hilt mod here on your Spellblade if you guys can find one. Otherwise, some other great options are like ice spikes, things that you can just kind of spam and always keep your spell cast increased damage enchantment active. Also, I really like this storming one here because whenever we cast this in from the shadows, it's going to constantly tick and crit, and that's going to increase our chances of creating the melee blades from the Stabbomancer capstone. All right, so taking a look at this build in action in the Chaos Chamber, I just go ahead and make sure I am stacked up to ×11 on the spell weaving before I really even get in. That way I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the time. That's also why I don't like to run the Buffmeister for just general play as well, because having a spell that you can spam is really going to increase your capability of keeping spell weaving at 11, which is going to be a ton of increased damage. That way I don't even have to think about it, and we're still outputting so much damage regardless that it's just not necessary for general mobbing, especially in like non-elite encounters like this opening one. You just straight up don't need it. Now I have nasty spill on right now as my modifier. I had some pretty bad choices, so hopefully we don't actually end up dying here. But otherwise, to show you on an elite encounter just what this setup can do. This enemy is resistant to shock, which is a obviously huge part of our damage. That was an elite enemy, and we just absolutely destroyed it. And then really quick to show you guys why I like Ancient on my melee so much. Here, I'm going to just be hitting the Dragon Lord statue. And as you guys can see in the bottom right corner, my action skill is really cooling down very quickly. You guys can be cycling these from the shadows so quickly. It is so nice for just consistent damage, keeping your enchantments procced, and also survivability, because the enemies won't really be shooting you as long as you keep moving away from where you activated it. But yeah, that's our Stabbomancer Spellshot melee build. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hopefully you enjoy smacking some things and watching them just disappear right in front of your eyes. This is one of the best bossing setups I have actually played in the game, even opposed to like our actual spell build. That one requires a lot of setup to actually get like a lot of those cool one shots that we were doing. This one really doesn't require that much, just some reloading before you jump in. It takes a couple seconds. You can do it usually like on your slight run there, and you guys will be able to smack these bosses down in like 5 or less hits depending on the boss. And overall, it's just a ton of fun to be able to use a melee weapon and be able to destroy things. I know it's Spellblade, but nonetheless, it's still really powerful. We're going to be punching things, and it's always a good time. If you guys did enjoy the build, make sure you guys leave a thumbs up on the video to let me know. It really does help me out. Also consider subscribing for more Wonderlands content. We got a bunch more builds and things on the way. And like I said at the start, if you guys want to try out this build, I will have this save file in our Discord, so make sure you go down to the description and check it out. Once again, I'm sorry for the lack of videos. Once again, my life has been pretty crazy over the past few days, and I appreciate you guys hanging with me. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to have a lot more content very soon, so please just stay tuned and bear with me. Thank you guys so much. But anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya.